Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and it's a new week, which means another pair of Godzilla watch-alongs, and we're done with the Showa era. That era is long done. We are now moving into the second era of Godzilla with the Heisei era. Or, yeah, the first movie in this watch-along is The Return of Godzilla. It came out in 1984, and I mean, this is for anyone who's a big Godzilla fan. This is a no duh, but this pretty much did for Godzilla what The Dark Knight Returns from Frank Miller would do 2 years later for Batman, where everyone's idea of Godzilla was this goofy, like basically goofy movies with guys in rubber suits, monsters fighting, and this is the movie that reminded people, yeah, Godzilla was not always a good guy. Like, he started out as a metaphorical creature for nuclear Armageddon. And The Return of Godzilla does exactly that. So, again, yeah, we're just going to hop right into this. For those of you who are watching this in post, this movie is not available on any sort of streaming service. The Terror of Mechagodzilla was the last one that you could watch on a streaming service, whether it be HBO Max, at least until Godzilla King of the Monsters, or the Criterion Collection, because the Criterion Collection only has the Showa era of Godzilla movies and nothing else beyond that. So with The Return of Godzilla, for this one, it is the Japanese version, not the terrible US re-edit Godzilla 1985 with the shameless Dr. Pepper product placement. This is the authentic Japanese version from 1984. And it's pretty much you're gonna need a Blu-ray for to watch this. It'll probably be better that way. Gonna get some water. Also, first of all, before I get to some more housekeeping, I want to welcome everyone in the chat right now who's joining us. The regulars are here: Justin Toner, Spiders Prime, DeQuant Tate, Gizo 100. Justin Toner says, I have fond memories seeing the American version of this film in the theater when it came out. I cried at the end thinking Godzilla was dead, and my mom was like, don't worry, he always comes back. Yeah, I have some things to say about the way this movie ends. But yeah, basically I'll explain it when we get to that part of the movie. But first, some housekeeping before we start right into the movie. I've been invited on to another watch along tomorrow, 1 p.m. my time, Pacific Standard Time, for Matthew Broderick's Godzilla. Basically, a Twitter friend of mine, Matthew Farley, who has the YouTube channel and website Mad at the Movies, invited me to come along for a Godzilla watch along, and with some other people that I either have met in person or know through Twitter in sort of the Schmodown era of Twitter. So this should be an interesting watch. And that begs the question that some of you have actually asked: will you still be doing Matthew Broderick's Godzilla for your own channel? And to that I say yes. As much as I don't want to watch that movie like within 1 month twice, I did promise long before I got invited to this watch along that I would be doing the Matthew Broderick Godzilla, so I will be doing that. So that will be tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and that's actually going to be on his channel, Matthew Farley. I will post a link to the watch along when the time comes tomorrow, but yeah, 1 p.m. It's not going to be on my channel, it's going to be on his. And we will be going at it with Roland Emmerich's Godzilla, or Zilla, as it should be known to by the world. And that does it for housekeeping. So rather than just constantly talking about Spiders Prime says, or DVD. Yeah, it would be ideal to also have a DVD of this as well, but I just say Blu-ray because DVDs are so outdated right now. Like, it boggles my mind. I mean, okay, you know what? I can't say it boggles my mind why people still buy DVDs because they're cheaper. But, yeah, I'm a Blu-ray guy. I'm a Blu-ray guy, and there's a little part of me that might be transitioning into the 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray disc format, but that's probably not going to happen anytime soon, at least within this year. But anyway, there's that rant. So without further ado, there's no Criterion logo. There's no Janus Films logo at the top of this. We're going to just start with the Toho logo right away. And so I am pushing play for the Return of Godzilla right now. There's something ominous about the fact that there's no music playing at the actual Toho logo. Godzilla. Because that's what it is in that's what the title is in Japan. Boy, that must be very confusing, because here we have 3 movies with the name Godzilla. The original Godzilla, Roland Emmerich's Godzilla, and Gareth Edwards' Godzilla. In Japan, they have 4 movies that are called Godzilla. One from 1954, one from 1984, one from 1998, and one from 2014. So that's got to be incredibly confusing. Okay, so I'm watching this through the Kraken DVD. And one thing that I wish they didn't do with the subtitles is just put white subtitles directly over the Japanese text. Like, what should have been better is they put the English subtitles above or below the actual Japanese subtitles. That way it's easier to read. They're being pulled towards the island. That's... I mean, it's got to be the wind. Like, I can't think that it's some mysterious force pulling them towards the island. I do hate this kind of slow motion where, like, the frame rate just drops. And that's a weird, like, Godzilla's roar was there, so we know it's Godzilla. Like, that's a weird way for him to be introduced, and such a weird transition as well. Oh, I didn't know they subtitled part of the song. Yeah, DeQuantate mentioned that there are parts of this movie that play out like a horror movie, and for the longest time, I mean, for the longest time, this was always one of the scariest Godzilla movies to me, just in how, like, dark and ominous it is. Which I don't think has been beaten, at least up until Shin Godzilla, or the very first time I saw the original 1954 version. And this weird purple lighting that's inside the ship, definitely, like this part right here, kind of reminds me of Ashiro Honda's The H-Man. Because there's a sequence in that movie where characters go on board a ship that's abandoned, and just some horrific stuff happen. That's got to be a reference to Psycho, where a character like turns another character sitting in a chair around, and it's a corpse. I say that corpse could look a little more convincing, but still kind of creepy. Ew. Yeah, when I first saw this movie, when I first saw this movie on VHS, um, like I had fully forgotten about these weird leeches, um, or sea lice. I know they have an official name, but I honestly can't. There you go. Shock Shockirus. 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 And there's like a legit reason why I keep forgetting these things exist, or at least up until I saw the Japanese version. Wow, that's some. Whoever was in charge of the subtitles for all the for labeling certain words in Japanese, they did a good job, and that shot was not convincing at all. Neither was that one. Well, yeah, there's a reason why I keep forgetting that these things exist because um, they were mostly cut from the American version. So for this version here, in the Japanese version, they're pretty prominent, and they have have Ebira's roar. Yeah, when they're I could see why they cut them out because when they're flying it through the air, like it's clearly not at all convincing. And these things are the equivalent of the Mega Nulon from Rodan, where like you go into this movie expecting some sort of destructive reptile, but you don't expect there to be like some weird human-sized insects as part of the horror as well. Does Godzilla love me? I would hope he does. You know, it's like we know that Godzilla's in this movie, but they do a pretty decent job at building him up. Sir, there's no need to shout. We already announced that we're here to save you. Normal circumstances, I would question why so many people don't believe the idea of giant monsters existing. But considering that this movie is pretty much like the 2018 Halloween movie where it ignores everything except the original, I don't blame them, especially with that 30-year gap. There's probably a generation that forgot Godzilla even existed, or doesn't even know about Godzilla, or doesn't believe Godzilla's anything but like pure fantasy or a hoax, if we're taking the political route. So the scientist here was actually supposed to be played by Akihito Hirata, who we all know as Dr. Serizawa, but he died of, I believe, cancer just either the year before this movie came out uh, the or 2 years ago. So instead, you have the actor that played the cop in Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster. And he honestly looks unrecognizable compared to his role in Ghidorah. Uh, Yosuke Natsuki. See, this is a weird, like, this is a point of contention that can be debated. Like, is keeping this under wraps the smart thing to do? Because I mean, as we're seeing with the coronavirus right now, downplaying something as serious as this is probably not the best of intentions. I mean, they do say that there's no like guarantee that Godzilla will attack immediately, but the fact that they're like barring all news or any information getting out of, yeah, it's like if the like sometimes like this guy's saying, if the news got out, it would send everyone to a public panic. But like if you keep the news under wraps and then it's already too late, then that's even worse. Yeah, we should have gotten this version long ago outside of the American re-edit, huh? Because the American re-edit Godzilla 1985 does some stuff um, that I find like has some re-edits that I just find to be grossly offensive. Getting back to this character, this scientist here. I mean, there's no disrespect to Akihito Hirata, but I think it would have been very off-putting for him to play this role, the role in the scientist here, because this movie is supposed to be a direct sequel to the original Godzilla, in which he played Dr. Serizawa, whose character died at the end of the movie. So it would just really be weird. It would be weird to have Akihito Hirata play another scientist character in the direct sequel. I think the pipe's a bit too much. This movie, this not just this movie, but this series. There are a lot of movies, especially in the Showa era, in this movie, where a lot of the main characters are like brother and sister in terms of their relationship. In fact, I don't even think any of the movies from here on out have that kind of relationship between characters. I mean, maybe there's one movie where I'm forgetting it, but a lot of the movies prior to this had like a relationship where characters were brother and sister, and I think this was the last one. Kind of clever that um, this conversation they're having, the background is pretty much where a bulk of Godzilla's destruction would take place at the end. You know, what he does later on is actually pretty shitty. Like right now, it's like his intentions seem to be good. Wait, so she just? Oh, she went down the stairs because it looked like she just went around the back of him. That's weird. But yeah, what he does right here, what that reporter does right here is actually pretty shitty. Oh, also the brother is one of the main scientists in Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, who I think comes up with Godzilla's with the way Kiryu like actually thinks. Yeah, see right here, like he did that like not because like oh um I have some goodness in my heart, but no, this will provide a great this will be a great news story. This scene is pretty tense also. I'm also grateful that from here on out, um, the Godzilla movies would not dub over anyone who isn't speaking Japanese. No matter how terrible their acting is, um, they wouldn't dub anyone who would speak in a language other than Japanese. A Los Angeles class American nuclear sub. Oh, okay, one of the clever things about this scene is that they don't show the torpedoes launch. Like they'll show some exteriors of the sub, but to add to the suspension, they're just having the characters tell us um like what's happening out there. I mean, clearly like the special effects back then were not good enough to like show Godzilla chasing the sub. But yeah, this is and then like we get a huge close up of Godzilla's hands and chest and stomach. But that's about it so far. See, this is the problem where this is the problem with keeping Godzilla secret from the public, because now that there's heated tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, um, like metaphorically, if they had kept the news of Godzilla still secret, then that's nuclear Armageddon right there between America and Russia, and Japan is just stuck dead in the middle of it. That's not the best looking image of Godzilla, but it still paints him in some sort of mystery. Now I'm sure they didn't like actually plan things out, since the Heisei series has more level of continuity than the Showa era, but did they mean for this Godzilla in this movie to be the same Godzilla from 1984? Because, I mean, as we would know later on as the series progresses, that this is a different Godzilla. Godzilla lives. Godzilla sinks nuclear submarine. Will Godzilla attack Japan? Godzilla has returned. Yeah, that's like such a shitty like thing to do. Like just exploit their reunion. Yeah, 1954. Get out of my way! Yeah, clearly she's more mad at him than her brother is. Okay, so they established Super X right away. Because I, for longest time, I always thought that the Super X just kind of came out of nowhere. Um, and granted, it's we don't see it until the third act, but third act, I guess. Yeah, I'd say the third act. Well, it's farther. Yeah, just imagine if like if they had barred the news of Godzilla's return even longer throughout the movie. Like it's a good thing the nation is on alert. Um, it's a good thing the nation is on alert after uh, the news is broke, so that they can at least get ready for it. If Godzilla was real, what would be your reaction? I would hate it. Like I love Godzilla, but Godzilla does not need to be a real thing, especially in this year. And I think you also said Gzilla 100. I wish Godzilla was real. Nobody wants Godzilla to be real. Like, considering like you know what he was created for or what he represents, nobody wants Godzilla to be a real thing. You have a better shot at the Avengers being real or Batman. And those are like two things that I think people want to be real just because like they aren't metaphors for horrible things. Speaking of metaphors for horrible things, there he is. Yeah. And that's Godzilla's grand reveal in this movie. The face looks the face for this suit has always kind of looked a little weird depending on how you look at Godzilla, but it's a pretty um it's a pretty intense reveal. And Godzilla in this movie is played by Ken Satsuma. I mentioned beforehand he played Hedorah and Gigan in the Showa era. And he was actually Godzilla was supposed to be played by somebody else in this movie, but I guess something happened to the previous suit actor to where he couldn't do it. So Ken Satsuma stepped in, and his experience with this movie was pretty much like Nakajima's experience in the original Godzilla, where there was just a lot of trouble with that suit. And I think he lost a ton of weight while playing Godzilla. A better excuse for why they didn't detect Godzilla than most of the excuses our politicians give. Like the model work here in this movie is pretty great. It's the last Godzilla movie that Teruyoshi Nakano would do the special effects for, and I'm glad they like gave him the budget to like make a really good Godzilla movie. Because, well, I mean, like, Mechagodzilla, the two Mechagodzilla movies weren't bad, but they didn't really excel in terms of special effects. Whereas this movie, like, really excelled in the special effects department with a lot of detail. Now, there's more of a... There's definitely a charm to... there's a charm to, like, actually having these actors be in full suits performing these roles. Not a huge budget, but it's definitely bigger than all the Godzilla movies in the 70s. So, yeah, I give them that. Yeah, I give this movie some sort of credit. Because Teruyoshi Nakano basically created an entire Tokyo landscape for this movie. And someone mentioned, Daquan Tate said, "Is it me or does Godzilla's head look different in some shots?" That is true. Like this shot right here, where Godzilla's consuming the reactor, is a suit. But this shot, the shot here where Godzilla then looks up, that is done by what is called the Cybot Godzilla. Basically, one of the other things Nakano was allowed to create with this larger budget was a big Godzilla animatronic that was used for a lot of close-up shots. It kind of reminds me of the giant full-sized Kong animatronic that was made for the Dino De Laurentiis remake in 1976. To where, like, it's a huge, like, animatronic that's impressive, at least in terms of making it, but in terms of its movement, it's not really the best convincing special effect. Like, I mean, because the big consistency is that Godzilla's head constantly changes. Like, you could tell what's the suit and what's the animatronic Cybot based on the head. And when the Cybot's head is just being shown reacting to stuff, it's fine, even if the movement's a little jittery. But whenever you see, like, the Cybot's hands move, it is a special effect that does not hold up. And for those wondering why Godzilla just reacted to a bunch of birds, I mean, Godzilla pretty much is a giant radioactive dinosaur. Like, in the most simple terms, he's a radioactive dinosaur. And dinosaurs do share relationships with birds. Like, dinosaurs are pretty much the ancestors of birds, so it makes total sense. Do you think they will go back to suits in the Godzilla cinematic universe from Toho? Uh, I hope so. Because Japanese CGI just does not hold a candle to that in America. I mean, they made it work for Shin Godzilla because it was like limited and sparing, and there were points where the CGI in that movie like had me fooled that thinking it was a suit. But if they're gonna do more monsters, then I think they should go back to doing suitmation. Like it probably just in Japan, it's just probably more convincing. And if they gave uh, them a big a budget as they did with Shin Godzilla, then I think it can be pulled off. You're gonna clean that up, are you? It's nice to see Hiroshi Koizumi in a very, very small role in this movie. I hate to keep bringing it up, but if only like our politicians right now would listen to scientists and actually take their advice. Kind of interesting that this character starts off like they introduce him as somebody who's like studying Godzilla as like pure revenge, and now it's just he sees some humanity in Godzilla, which we'll get to that ending that I have conflicting opinions on. Ooh, that acting. Yeah, this entire sequence was cut down tremendously in the US version. Yeah, this whole sequence was cut down from the American version. Probably because it kind of villainizes America in a way. Like, really, this movie does not paint the US and Russia in a positive light. Sorry if I've just gone silent right now, but this part of the movie is actually just as fascinating as the monster stuff. Yeah, this whole sequence here was cut from the American version. And like it makes this movie so much more important. We got him right there. Yeah, it really this really plays into this movie. Like, the director is let me pull the director's name, because this is the only Godzilla movie this director has done. Koji Hashimoto. He actually was a assistant director for a lot of Ishiro Honda films, like King Kong versus Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Invasion of the Astro Monsters. So it's clear that he like worked with Honda well enough to to really understand what Godzilla represents, and stick to Honda's themes by the time he got around to making his own movie. Yeah, that whole sequence, again, like more like it's kind of like simplistic and straight to the point, but it just adds this. It adds a lot of depth to this movie, and one of the reasons why it bums me out that whenever people say that this is one of the worst Godzilla movies, like it just makes me go, "Oh, you only saw the American version." Because Roger Ebert, when he and Gene Siskel reviewed this movie, especially with Roger Ebert's review, he really did not like the movie. Let me see if I can find a quote from Roger Ebert. But it's like the movie that he reviewed was the American version. It's like, yeah, I don't blame you for feeling this way because the American version is so shallow and so dumbed down from what the original version represents. And I feel like that entire sequence with the foreign ministers, that entire sequence with the foreign ministers and the prime minister, is just so good. Anyway, here's a quote from Roger Ebert's review. The fatal flaw in Godzilla 1985 is that it is a bad movie with aspirations of being a good bad movie. Which, again, that directly applies to the American version when you watch it, but not the Japanese version. The Japanese version does not aspire to be a good bad movie. Like it aspires to be the best Godzilla movie since 1954, and I think it succeeds. Like this sequence I like right here, once they find out that Godzilla is off the shore of Japan, and you get this entire montage of everyone just hauling ass and getting out of the country. Oh yeah, that's another thing. The American version was supposed to be the original intent was to make it like some like really terrible Woody Allen like comedy. And it should be noted that New World Pictures was one of Roger Corman's production companies. So I guess you could say Roger Corman had a hand in this movie, even if he didn't flat out produce the American version. But yeah, Raymond Burr said he would not come back as Steve Martin if they made Godzilla as goofy as they wanted to. Yeah, I'm so glad like this movie was given such a like between the bigger budget and the fact that technology has come a long way since from 1954 to 1984. It just gives this movie a grander scope. Especially like this whole build up to Godzilla's attack on Tokyo where the self-defense force pretty much mobilizes and gets all their available artillery to the harbor. Yes, because those rifles are going to do so much against him. So how did the anti-nuclear anti-sub helicopters not detect that? Yeah, like this sequence with the planes flying, those planes look better. Like they're so convincing nowadays. And funny enough, like though that type of airplane that the self-defense force is using in this sequence, that's an airplane that only the Japanese. It's a real plane that only the Japanese developed. This part coming up right here has always creeped me out for some reason. Like the sequence where you hear where the fighters crash into the ocean, the sound that they make, I always thought that that sound before they crash into the water was of the pilot screaming. But it turns out it was just the noise of the planes crashing. And I'm disappointed that it's not what I thought. It's kind of weird that Godzilla just like dives underwater and then seconds later he just pops back up. It's like they don't even hesitate. The second Godzilla reemerges, they unleash everything. Even if there was one truck where it seemed like the same missile kept getting reloaded. Yeah, they unleash everything. And then this happens. Like, just one blast of his atomic breath destroys the entire dock. Sets one dude on fire. And just irradiates the rest of the soldiers. There's that Cybot again. Yeah, that thing doesn't really hold up too well. I mean, I imagine that okay, this part right here. Like the subtitles right there say I have to hurry and stop it cuz he's trying to stop the nuke from launching. In the American version, they purposely change it. Like, yeah, he goes in to try to stop the launch and dies doing it, or dies before he could even do it. And uh, and the American version, because the Cold War was still going on and U.S. and Russia were still like at each other, which thank God that's not happening anymore. Sarcasm. They changed it to where he purposely launches the missile. This part right here just creeps. Like, it's such a great example of this film's tone and dark atmosphere. And the music, like, some of you in the chat have mentioned the score several times, but this is probably this is my favorite Godzilla score that Ifukube did not do. because it's so dark and ominous. Um, Watch, like, coming up right here. Right there, you can see a poster for Ghostbusters. And that is stock footage from another movie. Uh, like, that whole sequence of all those cars getting blown up on the freeway, that is from the movie. Let me see if I can find it. Uh, Prophecies of Nostradamus. There is some stock footage used in this movie to simulate some of the destruction scenes. And I'll try to point them out as best as I can. But this whole sequence where Godzilla just walks down an empty street in Tokyo is just so creepy. And the music... yeah, the score of this movie... Like, this is a weird thing to say. Maybe not, but whatever. The score... Whenever I go to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal, which I don't know if that's happening this year... the score for this movie will often play through my head whenever I'm at Horror Nights. Because it kind of fits with that grim and, like, gloomy atmosphere. Okay, I don't understand that one dude who was smiling as Godzilla's picking up that train. That shot right there, like, I think that's one of the biggest, like, one of the, I mean, there's a lot of sins that Godzilla 1985 commits, but one of the more smaller, less offensive sins was cutting out that shot of Godzilla's reflection in the building. Like, where it's focused on the reflection of the building, not Godzilla himself. I think that's a pretty creative shot. I will say one thing, though. After Shin Godzilla and seeing how much that movie is, like, so dead on and capturing Japanese politics, seeing the city still being evacuated as Godzilla is on a rampage is kind of silly, I guess. But, I mean, at the same time, you gotta have sequences of people running from Godzilla, so... that's a nitpick by comparison. Who is more deadly, the 1954 Godzilla or the 1984 Godzilla? I would say that this one. I would say the Heisei. I'd say the Heisei Godzilla, because this Godzilla is pretty much the same one that would be in the rest of the movies up until 1995. I gotta be honest right now. Like, I don't know how the majority of people feel, but I feel more invested on what's going on with the Prime Minister in this movie than I do with the other characters that we're supposed to be following. That's a composite. Okay, this is a weird compositing shot because Godzilla's composited into the skyline of that area. I can't rewind it, but anyway, Godzilla's composited in the back, in the background. The crowds of people running around and panicking are composited into the foreground, but the actual shot that they used, if you really look past the crowd of people running, you could see Japanese civilians just crossing the street like it's a regular Friday night. So, I mean, I don't know how many people will catch that because they try their best to have the panicking crowds hide that fact. And you're probably focusing on Godzilla in the background also. So I don't know how many of you would catch that. This is weird. This aspect of the movie just confuses me. Like just this random bum that that just goes into this fancy 5-star restaurant apparently. And he's so crazy that he starts like yelling at Godzilla. I mean, given how dark this movie is, I guess it's a good idea to have inject some humor, even though the original Godzilla wasn't that humorous to begin with. I don't know that like the decision to bring in the homeless guy is kind of a weird one. I wonder if he was a comedian, if he was a Japanese comedian at the time, that actor. Okay, that noise. I don't know if you guys are watching this with headphones on, but that noise that they're using to turn Godzilla around and distract him is does okay. Thank God it's over. That does not sound good in headphones. Now, obviously, Godzilla sees them in the building. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him to not attack them. I don't know, because in the American version, um, Godzilla does attack them right before this tank distracts him and accidentally causes that to happen. And now it's become Godzilla meets the Towering Inferno, where characters are trapped in a building that's crumbling down, and they have to get out. I do wish these characters aren't bad, but I do kind of wish that um, they were a little more well developed for me to care more about the fact that they're trapped inside this skyscraper as Godzilla is rampaging. Yeah, those are some of the most useless science fiction weapons ever created in the series because they don't affect. Like, Godzilla just doesn't even seem bothered by them. And there's the Super X. It's like Godzilla doesn't even seem to be reacting to them. Like, I guess maybe the point of those weapons is not to hurt Godzilla, but just to kind of guide him. That uh all those shots there, people running around, was stock footage from, I think, Submersion of Japan, which was a 1973 film that Teruyoshi Nakano did the special effects for. Yes, they did. Gzilla 100. In addition to the giant Cybot Godzilla, they created a full scale Godzilla foot that's used for a few shots when Godzilla steps his foot down on the ground. And we haven't gotten to those shots yet, but they're pretty obvious when you see them. Flying soap. I never saw the Super X as looking like a bar of soap, but that's funny. Yeah, there's that Cybot Godzilla. And there's just something about the movement that, like, nowadays it's just so unconvincing. Like, ooh. Like, yeah, I'm not a fan of the Cybot Godzilla when it moves. Yeah, right there when you see its hands moving like this. Like, again, like when you don't see its hands, it's okay because they like there's robotics built into his chest to make like his chest move. And even though like a lot of the movements are robotic, it is pretty articulate. Like this is a true horror movie scenario right here. Like, I mean, like it's nothing like. I mean, yeah, there's there is like, I mean, of course, there's like a giant radioactive monster, sure, but the idea of a nuclear missile heading for Tokyo in 30 minutes, like that's more of a horror movie than a giant monster right there. And in Godzilla 1985, that shot of Godzilla uh, firing his atomic breath at the Super X and mildly burning it was moved to right before the Super X starts attacking Godzilla. Also, Godzilla Godzilla collapses right in the American version. Godzilla collapses right before the missile launches, and if you look to the left side of that monitor that's showing the missile's trajectory, you could still see Godzilla standing. See right here, he collapses. But when you see that same shot in the American version, it doesn't make sense because at that point Godzilla's already collapsed on the side of the building. Yeah, it's like, yeah, in other situations it would be a time for like relief, but there's a nuclear missile heading their way now. That's a cool composite shot there where there's a bunch of Japanese crowds headed towards Godzilla to see if he's still alive or if the Super X killed him. But at the same time, it's like, what are you people doing? Like run. Yeah, I wasn't alive during the Cold War, thankfully. Um, Even though like right now is just a hellish time already. Okay, this shot right here of that missile launching, that is from a movie called The Last War, which came out in 1961. But anyway, as I was saying, what was I saying? Oh yeah, I wasn't alive during the Cold War, but like this movie, putting Godzilla in this period and like rebooting him in this era makes so much sense because like since Godzilla's always been a metaphor for nuclear destruction, it's interesting to see a movie take place in an era where Japan is pretty much like right in the middle of America and the Soviet Union, and how they must feel about the whole thing. Okay, that shot right there. There was a long shot of the building, and I think they put a monitor, like a little tiny monitor, in the window that the main characters are supposed to be in. Originally, this movie was supposed to be something, I think, entirely different. Because the original concept was supposed to be Godzilla would fight a monster called Bagan. No, wait, Bagan? I want to make sure that's right, because I know there's a Pokemon out there with nearly the same name, except one letter's different. Okay, I'm using Toho Kingdom as my frame of reference, and yeah, the original idea that Tomika Tanaka proposed was that Godzilla would pretty much be fighting a giant monster named Bakken. And there was another version of this movie where pretty much it was a shape-shifting monster that would fight Godzilla, which, I mean, that sounds cool and all, but I think having a just complete solo Godzilla movie in the 80s, yeah, having a Godzilla movie that is just like no other monsters but him in the Cold War era was the best thing they could have done for a reboot. Because again, like I said, this is pretty much like much like how with Batman, the public opinion before The Dark Knight Returns was published was Adam West, and then Frank Miller came in with The Dark Knight Returns and recontextualized Batman into the Batman that we think of today. This movie does the same thing with Godzilla, where it I don't want to say this movie recontextualized Godzilla, but it definitely reminded audiences what Godzilla originally represented. And having him fight another monster would just take away the point. Like you're adding another monster for this movie, for Godzilla to fight, just means you're getting completely away from the original intent of what this movie's supposed to do. Okay, so now those two actually absolutely have to get out, because the scientist is safe, sure. But yeah, they're still screwed. Like, this actor here, let's see if I can find Kenji Kobayashi as the Prime Minister. Like, he does such a good job, like, with very little dialogue. Like when one of the officers in the bunker, like, lets him know that it's 2 minutes till impact of the two nukes, like, you could just tell, like, he is tense during the whole sequence. You know, you gotta wonder if the Russian nuke didn't accidentally get launched, what would become of, like, the rest of the movie? Like, like right there, as soon as he hears that's a direct hit, he just sits down with this look of relief that the city didn't get nuked. But if that whole, like, conflict didn't happen with the nukes, what would have happened with Godzilla? Would he have just, like, would they have just left him there? Would they have had to carry him out? Like, it's... Oh yeah, this moment here is, like, it's one of those perfect blends of beautiful yet haunting, because you have this giant, like, radioactive fallout that makes a red sky. And the music definitely plays a good role in it. I like how those tanks are still there. And that's a cool shot, like from a low angle, like as if someone's standing on the bridge looking towards the Super X and Godzilla. Yeah, and if we didn't have the conflict with the nukes, Godzilla probably would not have woken up so quickly. Okay, so was that crowd just standing there the whole time? It's like they clearly didn't get the memo that Soviet missile was headed towards Japan. It's like even if there wasn't a nuke headed towards Japan, did that crowd just stand there the whole time watching Godzilla and didn't even think to run? Like that might as well be the equivalent of the people who won't wear masks. It's like, you idiots, get out of there. Like, just listen to what the prime minister is saying. Or in our case, don't listen to what the president's saying. But whatever, I'm not going down that rabbit hole. It's kind of hard for me to not it's hard for me to not like talk politics with this movie. But I will avoid any current politics right now and just watch Godzilla fight the Super X. Yeah, that shot there of Godzilla roaring, not really that convincing of a look. Like, sometimes when you see this Godzilla suit, like, in full-on profile shot... No, wait. No, when you look straight ahead at Godzilla, it does not look that convincing. Like, it kind of looks silly, the suit. But when you look at him from the side, he definitely looks threatening. There's more stock footage from the submersion of Japan. Yeah, yeah, the gill. Okay, Godzilla's gills. Um, Tomi Tanaka has stated that his gills are the holes in his neck that are supposed to be where the suit actor could see out of, which that's a clever way to take a design aspect of the suit and turn it into a like biological piece of Godzilla's a piece of Godzilla's like biology. The sequence of those two characters within the building trying to get out and just taking the stairs, like that must be a nightmare for anyone who has claustrophobia or vertigo, because you're trapped in a building, you have a fear of heights, and it's a tiny space that you're trying to get out of. There's that life-size Godzilla foot. Man, like, Ken Satsuma, like, must have been covered with... Like, it's clear he's been covered with a bunch of little tiny explosives all over the suit. And this part, like, I don't know if that was a... Was that a nuclear plant, like, in the middle of the city? But it's like that one whole blast caused an entire chain reaction that I can't rewind, but like it engulfed Godzilla in flames, and he's just standing there unaffected. And he pretty much turned the whole city into a fiery inferno. There's that bum again. I will say this bum, this uh this homeless guy, he's not unfunny. This character, I mean, but he feels like he's in a completely different movie. And again, like it's good to have like some humor, especially in movies as like especially in like some of these more supernatural movies where there's something supernatural going on no matter how dark it can be. But again, considering that the first movie wasn't all that humorous, it just kind of feels out of place. So I guess the commanders got killed in that explosion and the pilots are still alive. Because that was a pretty big fireball that came out of the control room. Yeah, that shot of Godzilla right there did not look convincing. And you know what? I'm going to take this same building that I collapsed into. I'm going to topple it over and crush this thing with that. Huh? That's a pretty like that's a big declaration that Godzilla is unstoppable right there. Yeah, if you look at the neck right there, you could see the little holes that allow Ken Satsuma to see through the suit. They're going to show that shot again, so I'll point them out. Yeah, those, like, you could kind of see the holes there, but again, according to Tomiyuki Tanaka, those are supposed to be Godzilla's gills. Okay, I like how there's a bike there, and the thing he steals is a briefcase. That's that's a bizarre like, okay, this part doesn't make any sense. Like, he barely fell. And now he's shit talking Godzilla. And so, does he just like suddenly sleep, or did he just die? Like, I don't I don't know what happened there. And one thing I should mention for those of you who are not longtime viewers, for those of you who, okay, I want to take a poll from. I can't actually make a poll on the chat, but I want to just get a vote from you guys watching live. Um, when did you first subscribe to my channel? Like, when did you first start watching me? Um, like, what year did you subscribe to the channel? And have you been watching my reviews since I did them on my original channel? Because there is a story that I have, and I just want to kind of get an idea of how long each of you have been subscribed to me on YouTube before I could tell this story. Spiders Prime 2019. Okay, so you're relatively new. Justin Toner, so just this year. Gzilla 100, no. So does that mean you? What year did you subscribe to me? Like, maybe I could get a better answer through that. Not sure. Okay, that's fine. Um, I could probably tell this story right now. So on my old YouTube channel, can't remember, but I have your videos. I've watched your videos for years. Um, so I okay. So this particular channel I started in April of 2013 because I started doing movie reviews on my old YouTube channel, which right now is totally abandoned. And uh, before I started reviewing movies, I just used it to upload random theme park videos. But in February of 2013, 2 months before I started this channel, I did movie reviews for I did reviews for the Godzilla series, and because I wasn't worried about monetization at all, I constantly played like the movie's scores in the background. Yes, I did do some written reviews on when the 2014 movie is coming out. I did do written reviews on a site called Geeked Out Nation, which sadly doesn't exist anymore. But I did do written reviews of the Godzilla series in prep for the American version. Anyway, when I reviewed The Return of Godzilla for the very first time in 2013, near the end of that review, I did a thing where I was opening the window because I was recording in my dorm room, and my desk that I claimed was next to a window, so I just had to open up a window, and I like look out and see that Godzilla is out there. You can find it on I think you can find it on YouTube somewhere. It's probably not that hard to find. Let me look it up. Let me just post it on let me post it on the in the chat. I'm not proud of this review, mainly because I've yet to like be more like detailed in my reviews. It's more rambling than anything. You know, I'll find it, but let's just enjoy this final sequence before I do anything. Because I'm kind of getting away from like one of the biggest points of the movie. Yeah, this ending sequence, like it really. Someone pointed this out earlier, like at the beginning of the stream. Um, who was it? Justin Toner pointed this out right before we started watching the movie, that this ending made a lot of Godzilla fans cry when they first saw this movie on VHS. And it did me too. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that this ending did make me cry. And I think in the American version, like, when Godzilla falls into the pit here, even though that is clearly a doll, like, there's nobody in that suit. And Godzilla's not moving at all, but, like, I think because they added an additional sound effect when Godzilla fell into the volcano, that's what was the breaking point for everyone, on top of this score. So yeah, it definitely made a lot of Godzilla fans cry at the end. But when you're older, like, or when I got older and started watching this movie with an adult perspective, I just thought to myself, wait a minute. Godzilla's been the villain of this entire movie. Why are we crying for him? Like that doesn't make any sense. But like there's a reasoning that the director has to why this was sort of his intent, like to make audiences feel something for Godzilla, because I don't have a quote, but this director has said that like Godzilla was supposed to be a creature of like basically Godzilla was irradiated by nuclear weapons, not by choice, and so Godzilla pretty much is a tragedy in a way. I guess I could kind of see that in why the ending is made to be so tragic. But again, Godzilla's been the villain of this entire movie, so it's just when you think back at the fact that I cried at this ending, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, wait, I cried for the villain of the movie dying. Or dying, I'm sorry, because he didn't die. It just doesn't make any sense when you really think about it. Yeah, in the ending of the American version, Raymond Burr gives a speech, like just this ending like monologue that I believe he wrote himself, going to show how much he took this seriously when apparently nobody else would. And it's a good speech. Honestly, it's a better way to end the movie than this really bizarre, out-of-place pop song, which I didn't even know like existed until I saw this version for the first time. I mean, it's a nice song, I guess, but doesn't really fit for Godzilla. And there's the end. Alright, so that was The Return of Godzilla. In my top 10 list of Godzilla movies, I think this is ranked at number 9. And the only other movie in the Heisei era to trump The Return of Godzilla in terms of being the better movie. Can't believe I used that name in that way, because that name is just so... That word is just so tainted with horrible stuff. But Godzilla vs. Destroyer is the only other Godzilla movie... The only Godzilla movie in the Heisei series that topped The Return of Godzilla. I'd be curious to see how... Because honestly, like, Destroyer and this movie are the two best in the Heisei era, in my opinion. So when we get to Destroyer, I'm wondering if that will still be the better Heisei Godzilla movie, or will The Return of Godzilla take that spot instead? Because there's a lot that I love in The Return of Godzilla. And because so many people are, like, mainstream audiences are conditioned to the American version, I feel like The Return of Godzilla does not get the credit that it deserves. Like, we're, by this point, by 2020, we're all exposed to the Japanese, the original 1954 Godzilla, as opposed to the Americanized version, King of the Monsters. And, but because The Return of Godzilla is not released through, like, a major company like Criterion, I don't think it's just gotten the respect that it deserves amongst the mainstream. So, it would just be really nice to see more mainstream audiences get into this movie. Oh yeah, that link. Let me first find it. Miraculously, this review's... I put in... Okay. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, there we go. It's the first thing that pops up. If you YouTube The Return of Godzilla review Alex Robinson, my original review pops up. from 2013. Holy crap. Again, it's a review that I am not particularly it's a review that I'm not proud of in this day and age. But there is a funny moment. Again, there's a funny moment at the end. Putting the link right here. Again, there's a funny moment. Didn't even link it. There you go. There's a funny moment near the end of the review where I open up a window to get some fresh air or a breeze, and I edit Godzilla sound effects as if Godzilla's right out the window, and pretty much try to recreate the scene where Godzilla peeks into the window where the homeless guy is. I don't know. I'm not proud of the review, but that little ending part I actually kind of like. That part I'm kind of proud of myself for. It should be noted that I actually was high when I recorded that review. Not like crazy high, but it definitely I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to say anything that'll get me into trouble through YouTube because they're very sketchy about stuff. But yeah, that's my watch along for the Return of Godzilla. Tomorrow, gotta mention this because it's very important. Tomorrow, I will be a guest on Matthew Farley's first watch along. This is the first time he's starting to do watch alongs on YouTube. And I'll be joined by several other Schmodown fans as we will be tackling the 1998 fake Godzilla movie from Roland Emmerich. Again, it'll be 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I will post a link on Twitter and all my social media accounts for when that pops up, for when that starts. And then Thursday, we will be getting back into the real Godzilla movies with Godzilla vs. Biollante. So once again, for those of you watching the stream live, thank you guys for joining as always. For those of you watching this in post-production, I encourage you for the next time to join me and us in this watch-alongs because I encourage a bunch of interactions. Interaction between you guys in the chat. And if you really like what I'm doing with this channel and you want to help support financially, you can go over to patreon.com/TheRealMrRobinson. Because I'd like to try to do these watch-alongs for patrons exclusively. And if we get to a certain amount of patrons, and for $1 a month, you get access to exclusive watch-alongs. But if you cannot support the channel financially, that's totally fine. Just keep spreading the word on my channel, keep subscribing, keep sharing the videos, all that good jazz. And until next time, this is the Real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one.